City. I'm Susan Tehrani. These are the top headlines for this hour. NATO and the European Union vow to bolster their backing for Ukraine to fight off Russia's invasion and ramp up cooperation between Europe and the US-led alliance. Meanwhile, the Armenian Prime Minister says his country will not host Russian-led military exercises this year, signaling growing frustration with Moscow. Russian warship armed with hypersonic cruise weapons holds exercises in the Norwegian Sea. Brazilian security forces clear protest camps and arrest 1,500 people as President Lula da Silva condemns acts of terrorism after a far-right mob stormed the seat of power, unleashing chaos on the capital. The World Health Organization says it did not expect the surge of COVID-19 cases in China to significantly impact the situation in Europe. We'll start you off here in the United States, where the U.S. Justice Department is reviewing documents marked as classified found at President Joe Biden's former office when he was vice president. Biden's special counsel said that around 10 such documents were found locked in a closet at the Penn Biden Center, his private office, back in November. Papers were then immediately handed over to the National Archives. Biden kept an office at the think tank, which is about a mile from the White House, from 2017 to 2020. The story was first reported by American broadcaster CBS News. Special counsel Richard Sauber says that the documents in question were discovered late last year while clearing out the office space, and adds that the White House is cooperating with the Department of Justice and the National Archives. Quoting sources, CBS reports that none of the documents included American nuclear secrets. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland has assigned the Chicago attorney review the documents. Apart from this, the FBI has also launched an investigation into these documents. Republicans and pro-Trump leaders say they expect the same scrutiny and attention former President Trump received when he was in a similar situation. You may recall back in August 2022, authorities searched ex-President Donald Trump's residence at Mar-a-Lago. The raids came after Donald Trump allegedly failed to respond to repeated requests for cooperation on retrieving documents taken from the White House after his term. Reacting to the news, former President Trump wrote on his social media platform Truth Social, quote, "When is the FBI going to raid the many homes of Joe Biden, perhaps even the White House? These documents were definitely not declassified," unquote. While Republican leader from Texas, Ronnie Jackson, tweeted, "Where is the FBI? Where is the dramatic raid? We have two systems of justice in this country, one for them and one for us." Here in New York, 7,000 nurses in New York City's hospitals are on strike over pay and staffing. They want better working conditions. Many medical facilities have postponed procedures and appointments due to this, and fears are growing that things may even get worse. Enough is the theme as protesting nurses came out with their demands over contract negotiations and staffing levels at hospitals. The nurses' strike in New York comes almost simultaneously with strikes by nurses and paramedics in the UK.
So the nurses at Mount Sinai have basically come together to say that we're tired of being exploited, we're tired of our patients being abused, and most of all, we're tired of seeing them not get the care they deserve. We came into nursing to take care of people because we care about them. We come from compassion. And it's very difficult to come into the hospital every single day and know that we're not able to give them the care that they truly deserve. These hospitals have shown that all they care about is profits, but we are no longer treating patients like transactional items. They are people and they deserve respect, and that's why we're out here striking. It's not about money, it's actually about saving lives.
Sick and tired of the hospital only doing the bare minimum for us nurses. Time and time again, we are forced to take unsafe patient loads.
Management should be ashamed of themselves. They put these nurses in this situation. I do not know how they sleep at night.
After failing to reach a contract agreement on Sunday, the nurses from Mount Sinai's main hospital on the Upper East Side and Montefiore Medical Center in the Bronx went on strike. The New York State Nurses Association said it was being forced into the drastic step because of chronic understaffing that leaves them caring for too many patients. The walkout involves as many as 3,500 nurses at Montefiore Medical Center in the Bronx and around 3,600 at Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan. Montefiore and Mount Sinai are the last of a group of hospitals with contracts with the union that expired simultaneously. The Nurses Association had initially warned that it would strike at all of hospitals at the same time, resulting in a potential calamity even in a city with as many hospitals as New York. But one by one, the other hospitals struck agreements with the union as the deadline approached. Mount Sinai's administration said that the union's focus on staffing to patient ratio ignores the progress they have made to attract and hire more new nurses, despite a global shortage of healthcare workers that is impacting hospitals across the country. If the nurses strike, patients are likely to see disruptions in care, such as emergency room visits and childbirth. A day after storming of a Brazilian capital, over 1,500 supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro have been detained by the authorities. As world leaders condemn the riots, President Lula da Silva has promised to bring those responsible to justice. Meanwhile, Bolsonaro has been admitted to a hospital in the U.S. state of Florida with abdominal pain. Bolsonaro also tweeted a picture of himself lying on the hospital bed. He was admitted to a hospital in Orlando with intestinal pains related to a stabbing he suffered during the 2018 election campaign. Meanwhile, the U.S. has said that it has not received any official requests from the Brazilian government regarding the status of the former president after his supporters stormed Brazil's Congress. The U.S. State Department, however, said that an individual who no longer has a diplomatic visa should leave the country within 30 days, and Jair Bolsonaro flew to Florida 2 days before his term ended on January 1st and is believed to have entered on such a visa.
Leaving individuals aside, and generally speaking, if someone entered the United States on an A visa, which is essentially a diplomatic visa for foreign diplomats or heads of state, an A visa holder, if an A visa holder is no longer engaged in official business on behalf of their government, it is incumbent on that visa holder to depart the U.S. or to request a change to another immigration status within 30 days. That request for a change in visa status would be made to the Department of Homeland Security.
Meanwhile, in Brazil, thousands of pro-democracy protesters were seen on the streets of Sao Paulo to demand punishment for rioters. The protesters held signs reading "Democracy Forever."
Total absurdo. Nós, pós-ditadura de 64, o pior momento da nossa história. Eu acho que todo mundo ficou estarrecido com as imagens que vimos, né, no Congresso Nacional. Então, eu acho que a resposta é esta, foi bem dada. com essa Paulista toda ocupada. E é isso. A luta agora é para dar sustentação a esse governo que foi eleito democraticamente. E não vamos sair das ruas. Esse é o recado.
On his Twitter handle, Bolsonaro still refers to himself as the president of Brazil. More on him and Brazil protests in our next report.
Brazilian police on Monday cleared an encampment set up by supporters of ousted right-wing former president Jair Bolsonaro, a day after thousands of rioters ransacked the presidential palace, the Congress, and the Supreme Court. The assaults marked the worst attack on the nation's governing institutions since Brazil's return to democracy in the 1980s. President Lula da Silva promised to bring those responsible to justice. Demonstrators shattered windows, demolished computers, and graffitied walls before police in riot gear retook the palace. On Monday, soldiers outside raised the flag, while inside, Lula held a cabinet meeting with his defense minister and commanders of the armed forces. Justice Minister Flavio Dino said 200 demonstrators had been arrested, although that number is expected to rise. U.S. President Joe Biden joined other world leaders in condemning Sunday's riots, calling them, quote, outrageous. Sunday's attacks recalled for many the assault on the U.S. Capitol 2 years ago by backers of former President Donald Trump. Dan Restrepo is with the Center for American Progress.
Unfortunately, it's a story that's quite familiar, certainly to Americans. You have a quasi-authoritarian right-wing former president who doesn't accept an election result, in this case, Jair Bolsonaro, who actually fled Brazil a couple of days before the inauguration on January 1st of President Lula da Silva. And today, his supporters tried a coup. They physically took over the Congress, the Supreme Court, and the Brazilian equivalent of the White House.
Lula blamed Bolsonaro for inflaming his supporters after a campaign of baseless allegations about election fraud after the end of his rule, marked by divisive nationalist populism. Bolsonaro denied inciting his supporters and said the rioters had, quote, crossed the line. He left Brazil shortly after he lost the election and has been living in Florida. A Brazilian newspaper on Monday reported the former president was hospitalized in the U.S. with abdominal pain. A source close to his family said Bolsonaro's condition was, quote, not worrying. At least one Democratic lawmaker is calling for the U.S. to expel the right-wing former president. Representative Joaquin Castro of Texas on Sunday told CNN, quote, the United States should not be a refuge for this authoritarian who has inspired domestic terrorism in Brazil. He should be sent back to Brazil. The White House on Monday said it had received no requests from the Brazilian government regarding Bolsonaro's status in the U.S.
The war in Ukraine is about to complete its one-year mark, and there is no sign of a stop to this conflict. Now, a Russian warship armed with hypersonic cruise weapons has held exercises in the Norwegian Sea. Last week, Russian President Vladimir Putin sent the frigate to the Atlantic Ocean armed with new generation hypersonic cruise missiles. This was seen as a signal to the West that Moscow will not back down. Putin said that the Zircon hypersonic missile would be able to protect Russia from any external threats. Experts say that the target of a hypersonic missile is much more difficult to calculate because of their maneuverability, and therefore making it even more difficult for the target's nation to respond to the incoming projectile. According to reports, Russia seized these weapons as a way to tackle the U.S. missile defenses. Earlier, Vladimir Putin has warned that the U.S. missile defenses could one day shoot down Russian nuclear missiles. Apart from Russia, U.S. and China, a list of other countries are developing hypersonic weapons. They include India, Australia, France, Germany, South Korea, North Korea, and Japan. First, there was a massive storm in California. It was called a monster storm. Record heavy snowfall piled on Missouri, and now thousands of residents have been evacuated. There is also a forecast of fresh storms, flooded roads, and torrents of floodwater flowing through next to residential properties in nearby areas of the Santa Barbara coast. Officials are evacuating people from high-risk coastal areas. There are warnings of more heavy rain and snow to fall through this week. Earlier, California governor declared a state of emergency, and state officials urged Californians to avoid traveling during the storm. Until now, the storm has reported at least a dozen people have died and around 25,000 residents have been evacuated. According to data shared by the electricity department, more than 120,000 residents were still without power in the state. The National Weather Service warned that the West Coast is still under major threat as storms in the Pacific Ocean are likely to intensify. Expressing their despair, many residents said that they face severe damages and it will take them a long time to get back to normal conditions.
Yeah, I mean, this is the biggest flood that we've seen since we've been here, and certainly on the lower end of the neighborhood, so we're on the high end. It's crazy to see the flood line, overhead. I hope people were ready for it. I don't know if they were.
Calling out for climate change action, Hollywood television celebrity Ellen DeGeneres shared video of the situation in Santa Barbara. Ellen is among celebrity residents affected by the evacuation order. Oprah Winfrey, Prince Harry, and Meghan Markle are also residents of the Monte Santo area. Some experts believe the growing frequency and intensity of such storms are a symptom of climate change that will increase the challenges of managing California's precious water supplies while minimizing greater risk of floods, mudslides, and wildfires. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden has approved an emergency declaration authorization and authorizing the Federal Emergency Management Agency to coordinate disaster relief efforts and mobilize emergency resources in the state. The deadly storm was powered by two overlapping phenomena, which were an immense airborne stream of dense moisture flowing off the ocean called an atmospheric river, and a sprawling hurricane-force low-pressure system known as a bomb cyclone. The two key factors impacted the extreme weather across the country, becoming the strongest to strike California since last week. Microsoft is eyeing a $10 billion investment in ChatGPT's parent company, OpenAI. The discussions have been reported by Reuters, quoting a Semaphore report. The valuation of the San Francisco-based OpenAI will raise to $29 billion if the deal gets through. The Semaphore report says that the funding conditions stated that Microsoft would get 75% of the parent company's income until a point where OpenAI earns back its initial investment from the AI generator. Once the milestone is reached, Microsoft will get 49% of the total share in the company. The report, however, says that the stakes won't be known until Microsoft receives its money back. The news of Microsoft discussing investment comes after similar such investments by venture firms. Reuters reported that deal documents have been circulated to potential investors in the last few weeks, with the company aiming to close the funding round by the end of 2022. Tesla CEO Elon Musk launched ChatGPT on the 30th of November last year, along with investor Sam Altman. The chatbot since then has sparked quite a storm for internet users. ChatGPT is a software created to replicate human-like dialogue in response to user input. Several media reports, quoting analyst opinions, are speculating whether AI chatbot will challenge Google's hegemony someday. Speaking of Elon Musk, well, he breaks a new world record of largest loss of personal fortune. Musk has lost around $182 billion of personal wealth since 2021, some sources indicate the figure being close to around $200 billion. The loss resulted in breaking the world record for the largest ever loss of personal fortune. Musk's net worth dropped from $320 billion in November 2021 to $137 billion as of January 2023. The previous record was held by Japanese tech investor Masayoshi Son in the year 2000. The loss is largely attributed to the drop in Tesla stock values. Reports suggest that Musk sold around $7 billion worth of Tesla stock in order to finance his deal with Twitter, with another $4 billion in November. He also sold $3.58 billion worth of stocks, bringing his total sell-off close to $23 billion. The hostile Twitter takeover, coupled with Musk's polarizing behavior on the platform, has sparked the biggest Tesla stock sell-off ever since the company went public in 2010. One year after an American television network decided to stop airing the Golden Globes following diversity and inclusion concerns, the awards are back on the small screen. And here's what you can look out for. Hosted by Emmy-winning comedian Jared Carmichael, the 80th edition of the awards will be held in Beverly Hills, California. The last 2 years saw the Globes done in boycott mode. In fact, the awards that traditionally play a key role in kickstarting the movie awards season were taken off air last year. Major studios and actors boycotted the event following a backlash over ethical lapses among the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, which organizes the ceremony. But has the Hollywood Foreign Press Association made amends? And will the celebrities come back in full force? Tracy Morgan, Ana de Armas, Jamie Lee Curtis, Billy Porter, and Quentin Tarantino are among some of the presenters of the show. But there are a few A-listers who might skip the ceremony. Brendan Fraser, who has been nominated for Best Actor for his performance in The Whale, is the only nominee who has publicly said that he would not attend the ceremony because of his past experience with the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. Another big star, almost certain to skip the ceremony, is Tom Cruise. In 2021, he returned his 3 Golden Globes in light of the controversy engulfing the Hollywood Foreign Press. While films like The Fablesman, Top Gun, and Avatar sequel compete for the top honor, Eddie Murphy will be honored with the Cecil B. DeMille Award. This year, India too is making its presence felt at the Golden Globes. S.S. Rajamouli's box office juggernaut RRR has been nominated in 2 categories, Best Foreign Film, and the film's hit track Natu Natu has been nominated for Best Original Song. The filmmaker, along with the lead actors JR, NTR, and Ram Charan, are all set to attend the ceremony. Will they return home with a Globe or 2? We'll know soon enough. Thank you so much for joining us from New York City for this news hour, but don't go away. More news and headlines coming up next on WION World is One.
Additional drink, Arab?